Thanks very much. My name is John Townsend, and welcome to the Beyond Boundaries Webcast. For those of you who are in our studio audience, and also for those of you who are watching online, we appreciate you being here, and we hope it's going to be something that's helpful to you in your life, in your relationships with each other, with God, your people in your family, and your people at work. So glad you're here. Got a question for you. How many of you have ever been in a relationship with someone where trust went the wrong way? Just raise your hand if trust went the wrong way if you in a real relationship. Okay, online I can see you guys too. All of you guys had the same problem. You know, I'm really glad everybody raised their hand, because if you had not raised your hand, it would have meant that you are that person, and we don't want that to happen, so everybody, got on the right side of the question. Because part of the human condition is trust goes bad. You're open to somebody that you care about, you love, you want to get to know better, and then something happens. There's control, or there's betrayal, or there's deception, or there's somebody that is just all about them and it won't make it about you, or even really serious stuff like alienation, affairs, lying, and that sort of thing. Part of the human condition is that some of us, or all of us, are at some point in a relationship where there's trust has been broken. When Henry Cloud and I wrote Boundaries a long time ago, we had no idea of the impact the book would make, but what we began finding out was when people began to set limits against bad things and learning how to say no, their life got better. But then they'd come up to us at seminars for years and years and years and say, okay, I'm starting to understand boundaries. Now what? Now what? I've made my little gate here, and I don't let people in unless they really earn the right to be in. I can say no, and I can say that's not okay with me, or I don't agree with that, or confront things, or even withdraw. But now what? And the reason for the now what was that God made us relational people. We were designed for relationship not only with Himself, but with each other. And we are not ourselves when we're not deeply connected to other people. You look in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, and Solomon says, it's not good when someone falls down and there's no one to lift him up. And the problem with being so covered up with your boundaries is that you've got nobody inside you. So that's why I wrote Beyond Boundaries. I wanted to say, okay, here's now what. Here's what you do when you've been able to say no, but yet you feel that longing for a deeper and a closer relationship with somebody special. Maybe somebody in your family that there's been difficulty. Or maybe somebody in a marriage relationship that you want to make better, somebody you're dating, or somebody at business. Now, there are two kinds of boundaries. There's the defining boundaries that you should never give up. Never, never, never give up your defining boundaries, because that's who you are. That's your identity. That's your feelings. That's basically your soul. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, guard your what? Heart. Everybody knows that. Guard your heart, for from it flow the well springs of life. Don't ever give up your heart. But there's a second kind of boundaries, and those are our protective boundaries. And our protective boundaries are the ones that we can, once it gets safe enough, we can jump off the diving board into the water of relationship. Maybe you've had to set boundaries in a bad relationship or a difficult one when you're a little boy or a little girl. Maybe you had to in a marriage. Maybe you had to in a dating relationship. Maybe you had to in business. And you learned to say no and pull back and be careful and be more withdrawn. That is normal, and you should do that. But we were not intended to stay withdrawn forever, and that's what this material is about. Because God designed you to be vulnerable and to be intimate and to take risks, and there are no great relationships without risks. So the material we're going to go into is basically the story of how God gave us principles to learn that even though you finally said no, and you got rid of some chaos, or even abuse, or even someone dominating, or even a really crazy bad relationship, even though you said no, there may not be enough inside of a relationship for you, because what happens is, once you say no, life calms down, you get stability, and guess what happens? We begin to feel desire. Desire to be known, desire to be loved, desire to be affirmed. Once the chaos goes away of a bad relationship, we're ready to move beyond boundaries. We're going to talk about some of the content from the book that sort of highlights the different parts of this. It'll be 3 parts. The first part is, how do I know I'm ready? How do I know I'm ready to trust again? Because I might not be ready. So I've got in the book several stages to know that you're ready, and I'm going to give a couple of highlights. Also, we're going to have some great guests who have been through this, and they understand boundaries, and they've lived this, and they're going to tell us their story. And I'm also going to answer questions from the audience to give people a sense of what really people care about. So how do I know I'm ready? It's the first part. Second part is, how do I know the other person's ready? For those of you who may be fishing from the bottom of the pond, if you know what I mean, we're going to help you know when someone else is ready, when they've got the right character, when they've got the right attitudes, that this person is now trustworthy and this person is dependable. And the third part of what we're going to do tonight is, what is the process? How do I learn to take risks with somebody I care about so that we can both be close? You see, you may be watching this material and have an old relationship that went bad that you want to try again, and you really want to see if they've changed. Or you may be talking about, this is a new relationship. This is somebody that I don't know well, but I think has potential. But what are the steps to take risks? So that's where we're going to be going. So, first question, how do I know I'm ready? Well, most of the time people ask that question because what they have found in their life is that they weren't. They found out that they were in a relationship they didn't know up from down. They didn't know health from non-health. They didn't know whether a person was, a very straightforward person, or if they were dominating, controlling. They didn't know if somebody was fun and spontaneous, or if they were an irresponsible person. So they don't really trust their own judgment. Well, let me give you a couple of the highlights and tips to how to know when you're ready to begin to have your own boundaries and let go of the ones that you need to let go of to open up. The first one is, have you learned the lesson? Have you learned the lesson? Every difficult relationship has a lesson in it. There's something that I did that I put up with that I need to learn from. That's why I always ask people when I'm counseling or coaching or supervising, I always say, the big question for you is, why did I let that go on so long? Why did I let the lying or the control or the self-centeredness or the irresponsibility or the bad treatment or the judgment or the condemnation, why did I let that go on so long? And people begin letting the lights come on. Because if you've learned that lesson, guess what? You're a lot less likely to make the same mistake again. I have a friend who was a CEO, and he found that his company was not doing well because he always hired people who were very loyal, but they didn't have a work ethic. They loved him, they loved being there, they loved having fun, but they didn't work hard. And finally he realized, I'm just being a nice guy. Basically he said, I'm an employment agency, which is a problem if you're a CEO. That was the lesson he learned. I've got to have people who are loyal, but I've got to have hard workers who believe in performance too. Once he learned the lesson, he was ready to go back out in the workforce. Second highlight is, have you been through the healing process? Everybody who has a difficult relationship, whether it was when you were 3 or 23 or 43, you've got to get some kind of growth and healing. God has a process of growth and healing all of us need to go through. So, have you talked about it? Have you opened up? Have you found a healthy church, a healthy small group, a counselor, a mentor, a pastor, a spiritual director? Everybody needs to go through a process of growth and healing. So, just a couple of the highlights from the book. Have you learned the lesson about why you put up with it, and have you gone through a process of growth and healing? Well, speaking of somebody who's going through the process of growth and healing, our first guest, Christy, has a story, and she understands boundaries from inside out, and she'll help us, and you'll be able to identify with her. So, Christy, come on up here. Christy is a high school guidance counselor?
Yes.
Which means that's a hard job, right?
Yes.
And Christy, you had a relationship where you didn't even know you could have boundaries, and you didn't even know what boundaries were. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. I was married for almost 10 years, and the relationship started off seeming like it was going to be a good relationship because we actually met in church, which, talk about not having boundaries. I didn't think it was necessary to even be concerned. After all, we met in church. And anyone can look like they're a good, holy person when they're in church. But gradually things changed. Found out that this person was very manipulating and controlling. And coming from my background, from the home I grew up in, there was a lot of chaos. And my role was to sort of run behind adults and fix things and make sure that nothing causes a problem, at least not where I'm concerned. So I fell really well into the pattern.
And the fixer is always attracted to the manipulator.
And I didn't know that. And that's exactly how that worked. And it worked even better because I was shame-based, and it was really easy for him to make me believe everything was my fault. So, I couldn't fix it fast enough or well enough, but I kept trying. And it's like the harder I tried, the worse it got, because there were no boundaries. All I felt was if I could fix it, I was going to fix it. And with him being as controlling as he was, there was just no need for he didn't have to worry about it. I think when the relationship ended and I finally left, and it was just one of those aha moments, he was shocked because it looked like I could just roll with that for the rest of my life.
That was your first boundary, was I have a choice.
Exactly. And I don't think I did either one of us any favor by not implementing those boundaries along the way, because I never imposed them. When I was violated, I did not say, this is a problem for me, we need to correct, or can we, start this over again, and this is what I expect. I never did that. I just left. And it devastated him because he didn't see it coming. And I would have probably served him better by having put those in place because, see, he didn't grow.
More preventively.
Exactly.
Okay, so you learned the boundaries lessons, and you're on a new page now. Is there any anxiety, concern about the next steps?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because what boundaries taught me from reading the book and from going through the courses and the sessions, boundaries would teach you what not to do. And I felt like I can almost naturally know when I need to say no now, or when I feel violated that, that hurt, and I need to at least acknowledge that.
Somebody's crossed the line here, and the little alarm goes off.
Yeah, and I didn't have that growing up or even while I was married. I didn't learn that until in my 40s. But, now that I know that and I'm good at that, now the question is what do I do? I know what I don't do, but you have to learn. I'm learning now how to say yes when it's appropriate, because I'm really good now at saying no.
Christie's point is really important, guys. A lot of times when you develop that no muscle, sometimes you go, where's the yes muscle?
Yeah.
How do I know when it's time to open up again?
Yes.
Christy, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you being
All
here.
right,
And
thank you.
the lesson is Christy. Guys, most of us can identify with Christy's story, that once I learned how to pull away and say, that was kind of a crazy thing I was in, well, now, is it time to jump in, or is the same thing going to happen over and over again? Is my judgment any better? Is my ability to discern character any better? So, if your story's like Christy, that first part of the book really helps to know, how do I know I'm ready? Okay? Well, we want to allow time for a couple of questions on this first part about how do I know if I'm ready? The whole lessons learned and healing and growth part. So, we've got a little microphone here, and we can answer questions. And I just hope nobody asks a really tough one, because if I don't answer it, this is really a bad webcast. So, what kind of questions do we have? Anybody, just feel free to walk up.
Hi, John. My question is, what if you aren't done learning and growing in this process? I mean, is there ever an end point or a halfway point to this?
Great question. So many people think, well, I'm an onion skin. I've got other things to do. Are you telling me that I'll never have a great relationship again because there's always something to work on? And that's not true. When Jesus was talking to his disciples, he said, be perfect as I am perfect. And the Greek word there, teleos, means mature, complete. It doesn't mean perfect like having no flaws. And his point was, there's a level of maturity we get to where we can handle a relationship. We can make mistakes. We can apologize, or we can say, hey, that was yucky, that hurt my feelings. What I always tell a person is, go ahead and take a risk. Get with somebody safe in your life and begin to open up and see what happens. And what you find out is if you'll practice with the safe people, a good support group, a trusted friend, someone who wants to see you grow, who hasn't got an ounce of condemnation, and you open up with them and it goes well that means you're on the way. So find the safe people. And the second thing is, make sure that when you are taking a risk, you're really taking a risk. Now, I don't mean letting someone know every secret in your life, because I believe that should come over a process of time. But when you take a risk, really let somebody know something that they could maybe even hurt your feelings with. You certainly don't want to do this with an unsafe person. You don't want to do this with a person who doesn't have good character. But a risk is a risk is a risk. You can't stay on the island of safety forever. But when a good thing happens and they come back and they were kind with you and supportive and they're drawn toward your pain, and they're drawn toward your need, and they're drawn toward you, then you know you're on the way. Well, let's move on to the next part, because the issue is not just about, am I ready? But there's another person in the room, right? So you got to make sure that if I'm qualified for a relationship, is the other person qualified for a relationship? And that's what I talk about in the book, is there are ways you can know if you're with the right person. And I'm going to give a couple of the highlights from that, simply because sometimes we don't know. Our judgment has been so impaired by looks or our own needs or the fact that they were there. I know some people that picked someone simply because they liked them or needed them. Some people only pick people who pursue them. And that's a really bad criteria for picking a relationship. I mean, it's kind of like serial killers pursue people. So just because they like you doesn't mean they're the right person for you. So I want to give you some of the highlights. Here's the first one. Do they care about their impact on you? Do they really, from the depths of their heart, care about how they affect you? Because some people, when you say, the fact that you're 45 minutes late to the meeting all the time, that's hard for me, they'll say, well, you're overreacting, or it's all about you, or I try, and they kind of go into the victim role. Well, what they're saying is, I'm not listening to how I affect you. That's not a good sign. A good sign is, you know what? That was a bad thing, and whatever the traffic was, I don't want to affect you that way, and I want to be a better person for you. Do they, in their heart, care about their impact on you? I was working with a couple, we'll call them Dave and Tiffany, and Dave had a spending problem. He liked his toys, he liked his boats, and he liked his four-wheelers, and he spent too much. And Tiffany took the stance of, grow up, and this is bothering me, but she really didn't let him know how much it really scared her inside. So she was kind of the nagger, and he was a spender, and that's kind of an American marriage. And I got them together. It wasn't getting better, and I finally said, you guys got to work this out. And so I said, Tiffany, this time, I want you to tell him how you really feel. And don't tell him that he's immature and he's a little boy and how he needs to straighten up. He knows all that. Tell him how it makes you feel when the electricity is not going to be cut on in the house, when the utilities are going to be cut off. And she stopped, and she said, I feel like I'm 5 years old in a chair in the corner of my house, and there's nobody there, and I'm all alone, and I'm terrified. And I said, hold that thought, because I was really moved by this. Like, that was honest. That was vulnerable. And Dave turned around, and he said, you really feel like that? She goes, yeah, I really told you, but that's how it just scares me to death, because she'd come from an impoverished background. She'd had the lights come off in her home. It was a traumatic experience. I mean, it was really a lot of bad stuff in her life. And he actually began weeping. And he said, I had no idea. I thought you were just mad. I had no idea what I was doing to you, that I would really affect you at that level by being so financially irresponsible. And he was a changed man. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that helped Tiffany to say, he might be a person I can trust? Absolutely, because he cared from his heart about his impact on her. He didn't just change because it might make her feel better or be compliant or like try to avoid conflict or just tell her to get over it. He really saw how much he was hurting her. Is this person doing that? Because people that you want to open up to must care about their impact on you. Second one, are they an open system? And what I mean by open system is, are they getting good stuff from other relationships besides you? The body of Christ is supposed to be an open system where we've got lots of people in our lives, and some of them are very gracious, and some of them are very wise, and some give great feedback, and some are very accepting and warm, but we're supposed to be relating to lots of really cool and safe people. Open system. A lot of times a person will fall in love with somebody or go into business with somebody or have somebody in their family, and you are the only person that's giving them grace and truth and health and good supplements in life, so to speak. And it's a closed system. You're the only source of health. That's a really dangerous position to be in. Kind of gives you a Messiah complex at first, like, gosh, look at how I'm helping them grow. But it's a very, very sick system. The healthiest relationships of the world are where you've got your really good, safe people, and he or she's got their really good, safe people, and the open system means lots and lots of health and truth and love and grace. In fact, are they such an open system that if you checked out of the picture, would they still be growing? Or would they be in a panic state because they don't have you anymore? Sure, they'd miss you, but they need to be so connected to the right people who love them and hold them accountable and ask them how they're doing and keep them in the light. That's when it works. So make sure these people are open system people. Don't be the only source of love or support or grace for that person. That creates an imbalance, and you don't want that. That's how you know. Well, we've got another guest here, and he's got his own story about boundaries, and he's lived it too. And I want you to welcome Phil. Come on over here, Phil. Phil, you are a retired professional who is now in a second career as a city council person for a major metropolitan city.
That's correct.
You don't mind abuse, do you?
I guess not.
Well, thank you for what you do for the governments.
Thank you.
You have a story about boundaries and a past, and you had to learn some boundaries and learn about that. Can you tell a little bit about your story?
I did. I was in a marriage that ended in divorce after 20 years. And initially you began to ask, why did this happen? But as I moved along through that process, I learned the better question was to ask, what? A lot of times God will give you answers to what do you want me to learn from this? What can I bring here that makes me a better person?
Kind of got you out of the blame game.
That's right. So I went through a period of years trying to figure out how I could be a better person if the Lord ever gave me an opportunity to have another relationship and move into another relationship. And in His time, He brought a lady into my life. She was a member of a companion Sunday school class to the one that I was in. It met at a different hour. But we had the opportunity to do things together socially as a group, so there wasn't a lot of pressure there. And I got to know her through that process. And
Friendship first.
friendship, right. Going through that, just building a comfortable relationship. And so eventually it came to the place where I decided I wanted to move beyond that friendship level. And I asked her, if we could be in an exclusive relationship with each other.
In 7th grade, that's do you want to go steady? But if you're grown up, you say exclusive, so.
It's kind of hard to ask, somebody in their 40s if you wanted to go steady. But one of the things that she did when I asked her that question, she said, wait just a minute. And she got up and left the table that we're sitting at. She came back with her Bible, and she had a list. And she said, if we're going to go any further with this relationship, you need to answer some questions for me. And she began to read from this list the things that she expected in a new relationship.
How high was the bar?
Well, it was pretty high. But that helped me to know that she had been able to work through some of the issues that she had in her marriage of 25 years and come to a point of saying, these are things I didn't have then that I want to make sure that I have going forward. And that helped me to have a sense of comfort in knowing that, she's steady here. And I've been able to observe her in other relationships also. And there was a consistency in the way that she related to other people and the way that she dealt with other people. And so whether it was with me or whether it was somebody else or one of her family members or one of her work associates, there was this consistency. She was the same person.
You knew you could trust her.
Right. I had a comfortable feeling in knowing that she was pretty settled on who she was. She knew what she wanted, and I felt a sense of comfort and ease in opening up to the next step.
In the computer world, they have a term called WYSIWYG. And WYSIWYG's an acronym for what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, and I've met your wife, Judy, and she is that, she was able to be what she said she was in all sorts of relationships, and that gave you a great sense of comfort.
Right.
And the second thing I really want our audience to hear about the other person is that she had standards that were real and reasonable and like that she was going to like stick with. So you knew you had a person that really had her own life and her own values. And that's something to also trust as well.
Right, absolutely. And that gave me the opportunity to say to her, these are some things that, that I would like to have in this relationship. Mm-hmm. And from what I've observed in you, what I see with you, what I know of you up to this point in time, I feel comfortable in the fact that we can attain that.
It's just a great example of how when you take your time in a relationship and you really go after the character and not just the sort of the need of the moment, that you guys have been married now how long?
We'll be coming up on our 20th anniversary August of 2012.
Congratulations, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I love getting to know Phil and Judy because I love seeing redemption. That's really a picture of redemption, when something's been taken from us and then the right things happen and people go through the process of learning these principles and then you get the payoff. So thanks very much, guys. Okay, let's see if anybody's got any more questions in this segment.
Yeah, John, I do. My name's Craig, and my question is, how do I know that I can trust a new person when I've made mistakes picking the last person?
Yeah, sometimes we say, my people picker's pooped. When whatever it is in me that says this person is loyal and honest and will never judge me or whatever, if I've made mistakes there before, I really don't have a lot of trust. That's why in that second section of the book, I talk a lot about observing people. Jesus even said in the Gospel of John, he said, if you don't trust my words, trust my actions. See what I do. What we call in psychology the say-do disconnect. Do you say it but not do it? So watch other people in real time and not just impressions. But the other thing is, what I've often found is when you begin learning how to be honest about how you really feel and what you really think about things, like, gosh, I don't agree with you about politics, or no, I don't agree with what you're saying about money or marriage or whatever, and you're with a really good person, what you find is the healthy ones will move toward you and engage and not be threatened or defensive or escalate or get mad. And the unhealthy ones will sort of have a toot on you and sort of go upside down. So you learn to trust your judgment the more honest you are. I think that's why one of the reasons that the Bible has so many passages on truth and honesty and feedback, because you really do diagnose the character of the people you're around when you tell the truth. Okay, do we have another question?
Hi, John. My name is Carla, and my question is about when you're looking at other people, trying to find out if they are ready. Do they have to be perfect, or sometimes it seems like I always look for perfection and just need to know, can they be normal or
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very common question, Carla, is that a lot of times when you've had a relational struggle, nightmare, or however you put it, the needle will go way over into having no standards. I'm just glad you're here with me, and I know you're on probation, you got an ankle bracelet. All the way over to you've got to be Brad Pitt and Billy Graham, and you got to have all this stuff going on at one time, and we have these unrealistic standards, mainly because it's been a knee-jerk reaction to how bad it's been in the past. That's why I always think it's really helpful to be able to say to yourself, what can I live with? Knowing that everybody is going to have stuff and mistakes and bad habits, what kind of bad habits can I live with? Some people, they don't keep their house so well and they're a little bit sloppy. Some people are late a lot. Some people are a little bit rigid and kind of anal retentive and, sharpen all their pencils and put them in the same direction. And some people are really out there and aggressive and kind of like say what they think. Some people a little bit shyer. So be able to say to yourself, what can I live with? Just like Judy, I loved her list of 12 standards she had to have for somebody she'd be interested in. We need another list too. It's the things we'll live with. Jesus in Matthew 7 said, before you take the mote out of your brother's eye, you better take the log out of your own eye. And so when you are able to look at their misgivings and look at your own misgivings, all of a sudden, you've got what we call, as Carla asked, what's normal? Normal is two imperfect people who are in the growth path, admitting problems, being honest about it, and having enough grace to be able to connect at the same time. Okay, let's go to our third part. So now, you looked at yourself and figured out if you're ready. You looked at the other person, you figured out whether they're ready. The third thing is about a process. Because there is sort of a step-by-step way that we learn how to open up. Because if you open up too quickly, it might not go right. And if you open up too slowly, it might not go right. So in the book, I wanted to provide people with some pretty understandable ways that were simple enough that they'd know what they were doing in a relationship that might be important to them. All right. The first one is, and this is going to sound funny, you got to have the talk. Okay? You got to have the talk. Now, I know men like to have the talk. That's just the way we are. Women just want to watch football. Guys, we just want to talk about our feelings and how did I affect you and your inner child. I know. No. Yeah, that's really not really true. And gals, you're kind of ahead of us on that. We need to learn from you, because if you're going to move towards somebody that you're interested in, and whether this is business or family or friendship or somebody you're romantically interested or rerouting things with your mate, you're going to have the talk. And what I mean by the talk is you've got to say, I'd like to talk about us. Now, that's a risk in itself to say, I want to talk about us. Because the person could do some really, really crazy things. They could say, oh, that's just too touchy-feely for me, or change the channel, or nice weather we're having, or you're crazy, or whatever. And that's why I always tell people, it's really good to say I'd like to talk, because you're doing a diagnostic. What you're saying is, are you really interested in something better? Especially if you've either had a bad relationship with that person before and is trying to get better, or somebody new. You've got to talk about what you notice. And there's two things to put into the talk that I always tell people to do. The first thing is to say, I'm interested. I don't know where this is going, but I'm interested. You know, that's what Phil said to Judy. I want to go exclusive. I'm interested. When you do that, and you've put it out there, you've brought something into the light. And the book of Ephesians talks about that in chapter 4, verse 13, where Paul says, everything exposed by the light becomes visible. When you say, I'm interested, that's a huge risk. But go ahead and do it, because it helps the other person to see where you are. The second part, though, is also, here are my concerns. Here are my concerns. There have been struggles. I've let people control me. Or I've been in relationships where things have gone south, and I've got some anxieties about that. And what you're telling that person is, handle with care. I'm interested, but handle with care. And all of a sudden, you've changed the whole dynamic of the relationship into a team. I want to be close to you. You want to be close to me. Let's handle with care. So it's a great statement between two adults on, I'd like to do this, but we've got to pay attention. Second highlight, what I wanted to bring up from the book, that was also, you're going to have to deal with speed bumps. Now, what do I mean by speed bumps? Well, there is no relationship that I've ever known that's lasted any kind of time that was healthy that didn't have some blips in it. And I'm going to go over the 4 different categories of blips really quickly, but you're going to have speed bumps. And like we always say, if somebody says, well, we've been together 45 years and we've never had a fight, one of you is not necessary. So it's going to be a speed bump. Speed bump number 1 is just miscommunication. I thought you said this and you said that, and we kind of got our language together. Miscommunication is just two people. So don't worry about that. Just say, did you really say that? No, maybe I didn't. And give people a pass. You know, the Bible says it's a glory to a person to overlook an offense. Miscommunication. The second one is what I call innocent triggering. And what I mean by innocent triggering is some of us still have kind of landmines inside our heads from old hurtful things in the past, and we react. And it's like the other person is walking across the ground and steps over the landmine and gets this reaction. Well, where'd that come from? Well, there's no bad guys there. It's just innocent triggering. For example, I worked with a couple where she was a very, very direct person. She said what she wanted. She was very clear. He'd been raised by some very, very passive parents, and so nobody ever had to say what they needed or wanted. You know, instead of like, please pass the cornbread, they would say, I wonder how that cornbread is. I mean, it's sort of indirect people. And so he was not a very clear person. And so she would say things like, how's our money doing, or vacation time, or the kids, or whatever. And he would just never come around to it. And she would actually blow up at him and say, why don't you ever come out with the truth? Well, what we found out was that every time she was clear with him about money or kids or struggle or emotions, he'd panic because he had no skill set. He did not know how to have a direct confrontation. So he was triggered into shutting down. He just wouldn't say anything. I don't want to say anything because anything I say is going to be wrong. And what we had to help them both with was to help her to be patient with him as he learned to, as we say in psychology, he had to find his voice. He didn't have a voice. He didn't know what he felt. He didn't know what his passions were. And so we had to encourage him to have a voice so he knew what he felt and thought and believed. And she had to give him some space and grace to do that. So watch out for innocent triggering. Just no bad guys. And the other one is character issues. Now, character issues are different when you're having a speed bump in a relationship because they can be kind of scary, like deception or control or narcissism or blame. And those are the speed bumps that you have to stop and say, that was really scary for me, or that was this, or do you really believe this or feel this? And when you hit character issues, you must stay on those. Don't even go into the we'll change the subject or let's just keep driving or let's just have our dinner. You don't do anything until you've solved the character issue because it won't go away with just time. What I found is when people are honest and they even hit character issues, they can work out in the relationships. So pay attention to speed bumps. They're not a rule out at all. It's just life. But don't ignore the speed bumps. Well, we've got another guest who's been through her own life and who's seen the boundary stuff. She's experienced the boundary stuff, and she's got a lot to offer us in her story. I want you to welcome Rhonda. Rhonda, you and your husband own an auto repair company.
We do.
And you have your own story about how you learned boundaries from a very important relationship.
Yes. I come from a very dysfunctional family. Both of my parents are alcoholics and drug addicts, so there was no boundaries to be learned. That's something that as I got older and realized just how sick that was and that was not going to serve me well, at the end of my first marriage, I went into therapy and I was given the Boundaries book, and that's when my journey began.
So what was the first thing you learned when here you are, you got this family of chaos, and you see the word boundaries. Was that sort of weird? Like, what is this?
You know, it was in a way, but then again, like Christy, I was the fixer. You know, I was that codependent child. I was the, let me clean this up, let me fix the children, let me make sure everything's done, and I was that overachiever that came out of the chaos. So in a lot of ways, when I saw the boundaries, I was like, okay, what are these? You know, this is not anything that's been taught or practiced. It was very new. So
I want to make an
had to
important
start.
point here with what Rhonda said. Sometimes people say, well, my boundary thing came from a bad marriage. But a lot of times it comes from family of origin issues.
Correct.
Because mom and dad and siblings are sort of where the soul is created. And so you knew it from day one. You experienced from day one that kind of chaos.
Big problems,
Okay.
yeah.
So what do you think about what it takes to learn to trust again and learn boundaries? I mean, is it an instant microwave?
No, it's a process. And the book is great about that. To me, it's a how-to manual. And it would have been great to have had that along my journey,
I'm really
especially
sorry.
in the
I
beginning.
didn't write
Yeah,
it in time,
you know,
so.
you should have been on there. But no, it is really, really great. It is a perfect how-to book. I mean, I've written so much in it. And it kind of, I didn't have the same words that maybe you had, but it was the same. It was a way I found to connect with what you were saying in the book. And it is a process.
How have you learned how to, most of us are sort of like, get it done now. How have you learned how to be patient as you're learning about trust and boundaries?
The patience is a big thing in the process, and I think my relationship with the Lord has helped that tremendously because I go to Him and pray for patience. You know, let me be patient. Let me, do this slowly, not jump into anything. And it's very important to notice, learn your red flags, learn by actions, not what people say. Those are good things to learn. And as you're doing that, you're starting to see character in others, and you start to see where they might have failings or other things, because you become quite adept at seeing human behavior and how that's played out as you work through this process of becoming healthier and healthier.
All right, so for our viewing audience, Ron is telling you something. It's work.
It
And
is work.
It's not magic, and it's not overnight.
No.
But is it worth all the work?
It is well worth the work. It might seem hard in the beginning. You might seem like you're having a steep hill to climb. But from someone who's been on the other side of that hill, the work is worth it. Very well worth it. And you don't know that in the beginning, and it can be scary. But have hope. You can become a whole person. A person to enter into relationships, because like the book said, our lives are about relationships. And I wouldn't trade the relationships that I have with my husband and my 3 children and my brand new granddaughter, and I have hope for those. And I couldn't be there without the books and this structure and my God.
So the process that God has bears fruit.
Very much
If you
so.
stay with it, it bears fruit.
Yes, it does.
Thanks so much, Ron.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. If I ever write a book that says you can learn all this stuff overnight, you'll be the first people to get it. But I won't. It's just not how God does things. That's why Jesus had so many illustrations in the Gospels about a seed and growth. And seeds take time to come up in the soil, and they get fertilized, and all of a sudden the head and the shoot and the leaf comes out. And you've got to believe that about the process too, that it takes time. There's no such thing as a microwave overnight fix for these kind of things. It's going to take time. It's going to be an oven, but the fruit is there. Okay. What kind of questions do we have for this other section?
Yes, John, my question was, how do you get over the fear of having the talk?
It is a fear, and it is real. All of us naturally feel some kind of concern or anxiety before we have the talk. In fact, if you'd come up and said, I just love having the talk, I look for people to have the talk with, I'd say you've got a psychiatric problem. Because anytime you take a risk like that, there is that kind of like anticipation of what's going to be on the other side. Are they going to reject me, pull away? Are they going to blow up? Are they going to act like a victim? So I'm real big on practice and role play. I think that those are really powerful tools to be able to say the words you want to say with someone who's not that person. So you get with a trusted friend or a small group or somebody that you really know that you're safe with, and you just bring your little piece of paper. I know this sounds cheesy, but it really works. And you say, I want to tell this person I'm interested in them. And so what happens is, if you walk through that in the role play, the very emotions that you've been kind of dreading start to come up. I mean, you'll start sweating sometimes, or you'll start stammering, or you'll want to take it back. And the person's just there and saying, it's okay. I'm here. We'll get through there. And the safety and the grace and the acceptance that person brings in, all of a sudden your tachycardia drops and your respiration drops, blood pressure drops. All of a sudden you can get through it. There's a lot to be said for practice with somebody who cares about you before you go into a difficult conversation. Another question.
Hello, John. My name's Aaron. And what do you do if along this process things start to go bad?
And sorry to say, there's a percentage of times that they will go bad. Aaron's got a great question. There are 2 kinds of go bad in a relationship. There's the go bad where we can self-correct. You can say, sort of hurt my feelings when you made fun of me at the party. Or, I opened up and you gave me a bunch of advice and I really didn't need advice, or whatever. And the self-correcting types, that's just life, and I think that's not a go bad with a uppercase B, that's a lowercase b. And the best relationships in the world do that. But when you begin to notice character issues that won't go away, that's go bad. When someone is deceptive and will never take responsibility. When someone has an acting out problem, an addiction, some kind of a dependency issue that won't go away. When they never take responsibility for anything, and in psychology we call it externalizing. When they always externalize the problem, it's somebody else and it's you and it's other people and it's never them. That's when you may not have to leave the relationship because people do get better, but you're going to have to amp up a little bit. In Matthew 18, Jesus said, when your brother sins against you, go to him. If he repents, you want your brother. But if it does not, he says, bring 2 or 3 people. And then if that still doesn't work, you amp up into bring the entire church. Now we're talking about interventions. And so the point Jesus is making in that is when my relationship starts to going bad, I bring lawyers, guns, and money. I amp up. I don't just kind of every 6 months say we've got a problem here. I really escalate the importance of this. This is where the boundary stuff comes in. This may affect our relationship. I may have to set a limit on how vulnerable I am with you. That's not to say the relationship's going to end, because there's some people that finally they get it after a lot of sort of very difficult confrontations. But don't give up. But if you see a character issue that won't go away, you must escalate to the point that they begin to see, or at least they have a choice to see what their behavior is doing. Well, I hope that this material has kind of given you the answer that we began the webcast with. What now? You see, when you've been able to have a certain amount of stability, the chaos is over, the financial upside downs, the screaming is over, the arguments that you know the same argument's going to happen over and over again. You know what you're going to say, you know what they're going to say. When all that's over and there's a little peace inside, the what now means, where do I get a good relationship? Whether it be marriage, or whether it be a friendship, or whether it be a business relationship or somebody in my family. The thing that I want to leave you with is, don't ever settle. Don't ever settle. We have a Savior who came in and redeemed the universe so that we could have a lot better life. Not just a little bit better life, but a real lot better life. Not a life without problems, but a life of finding my mission, finding my purpose, being around some really cool, healthy people who love me and would never condemn me, and who listen to me and tell me the truth. Being able to heal and get rid of feelings that have been tormenting me and behaviors that have been tormenting me. When you don't settle, then what you're telling God is, I really want to do it your way because my way's not working. And that was the whole idea behind Beyond Boundaries. He's designed you, and He's designed a process of growth. That once you've had to pull away and be careful, you can find the right people to take the right risks. And when you find that right person, and you are that right person, there's really no better life. And I wish that for all of you, and thank you very much. God bless you.